In your copywriting career, you might find yourself gravitating towards tech brands. I know I do. I think that this is a great opportunity for you to think through voice and tone. As you write for technical companies, you will quickly learn that the distinction that you can provide as a professional communicator and writer on the team is not about your technical knowledge or your ability to understand dense technical concepts. Your value is going to be in your ability to take those technical concepts and actually simplify them, probably as much as possible, except for the white paper, and translate them to web audiences. You do this most effectively when you can capture the voice and tone of a tech brand. Through my company, Hire a Writer, we have created a very large-scale study where we identified norms and trends in the linguistic self-representation of all kinds of brands. We segmented those into these brand archetypes, and Tim is the archetype that we use for technical brands and technical copy. The reason that we did this is because it takes a long time to kind of learn some of the patterns of speech and things when you are onboarding into a new client or into a new industry. We thought it would be very helpful for copywriters if there were some kind of cheat sheet, right? If you could kind of understand more quickly what are they trying to say, and most importantly for tech brands, especially when you're dealing with like engineers and developers and teams of all that, what do they mean? Right? How do they want to come across in the marketplace? And we did find there are absolutely some commonalities linguistically and in voice and tone for tech brands that you can extrapolate and then use to your advantage to get to the finish line faster, to start making relevant, rich, meaningful content for tech brand audiences faster. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Joy Yule. The company I'm talking about is Hire a Writer. You can go to our website and actually take the brand voice quiz as many times as you want and kind of see what the output is. But I'll walk you through the voice of Tim now. All right, so I like writing for tech brands probably more than I like for almost any other kind of client. I think that tech brands are super fun to write for. I think that the challenge of taking really complex material and distilling it into something meaningful is really fun. And so I think a lot of you will probably agree. And since technology is such a hot topic and such a fast-growing field, it's absolutely something that most copywriters will probably at least at one point or another have the opportunity to write for, or at least encounter that opportunity. And you can kind of decide, is this for me? All right, so this is Tim, who you see in front of you. Was so beautifully designed by Adele, who I love from Honeygut Studio. And this is kind of this is the quiz. So if you go to our website, you can take the quiz there. So let's talk about Tim. Tim is represented by these brands. So I won't get into like the psycholinguistic and all the research and development processes that we went through in order to derive these findings, but rest assured they are significant. And these are the kinds of brands that I'm talking about when you will use a voice like Tim's. So keep up. That sounded rude, but you know what I mean. We're anthropomorphizing, right? Basically what we're doing is we're taking and we're saying like a brand is a person, and this is the kind of person, if a brand was a person, this is the kind of person they would be. So that's what I mean when I say archetypes, that this is kind of like a personal representation of a brand. That, to my thinking, is one of the most helpful ways as a writer to envision how you're going to communicate to an audience, especially across the internet, right? Because it's vague and it's not like that audience is in person and you can sit down for them, you know, in research rooms and go through all these processes of getting inside their heads. So it helps to kind of think of the brand as a person. How would that brand talk? And I assure you that's going to be a useful kind of paradigm regardless of what kind of brand you're writing for. But technical ones especially, right? Because you do not want to get so in the weeds with technical speak that you lose the personality. So brands like Netflix, Google, Apple, PayPal, Cisco, Facebook, and then all the ones you see here. I'll try to find the handout and put that in the caption because there's ones for these. We took and we typified the language patterns for this kind of brand. And the 4 words that I'd use to describe Tim are irreverent, sarcastic, tech-savvy, and unrestrained. So these are the sky's the limit. These are nothing sacred. These are push the boundaries of, okay? So you're going to use a lot of race car metaphors. You're going to use a lot of space metaphors. You're going to use a lot of sports metaphors probably too. But thinking about outside the box, like these people don't just want to go outside the box. They want to like crush the box and they want to be different, which sounds ironic being that we can categorize the formula of their speech patterns so easily. But that's a pretty shared human trait, right? A lot of people like to feel that they're different and what they're doing is different. Some visualizations. Like when I think of Tim, I think of, an open floor co-working space with exposed beams, right? And everybody's like in skinny jeans and flannel and talking about their, they've got dogs and in the office and all that, right? I didn't mean that to sound derisive. Okay. Also thinking of like the Apple store, right? Like white on white on white on white. There's a risk of sanitizing a brand like this when you're in your copy, right? Of kind of getting to the point where either you sound arrogant or you sound inhuman. And so that's one of the reasons for this. So for every archetype that we've done, we've chosen a reference from classic literature, because as a writer, hopefully you read a lot. And this is an important way to think through an author who wrote in this voice. And Oscar Wilde is the one we chose for Tim. His quote, "A little sincerity is a dangerous thing, and a great deal of it is absolutely fatal." Oscar Wilde was hilarious. So think about that sense of humor. It's part of why one of the words we use to describe Tim is sarcastic, because the sense of humor component is extremely important to the character of this, and it's something that tech brands want from a good writer. They want you to be able to take the massive world of complexity they're operating in and not just make it mean something, not just make it communicable to the average buyer, but to also make it seem unique and fun and interesting and human, right? That's a skill and something that you kind of need some of these tools and understandings in order to be able to do. So they're always going to be talking in most emerging technology fields, regardless if it's healthcare or it's metaverse or it's IoT or whatever, they're going to be talking about improving people's lives. They're going to be talking about what's next. There's going to be some like sci-fi, futuristic kind of language to it about reimagining what's possible, right? Again, back to that aspirational kind of idea that I had at the beginning. This is thinking through what goes through someone's mind when they get a tool in their hands that they've never had before, when they can do something easier than they've ever been able to do it before. What is that? What is that moment in the human experience? Tim wants to cast the vision for that. Tim wants to paint that picture of what does the future look like. And it's not dystopian, it's good. All right, in culture, so I think that anytime you do an archetype kind of process, you should always tie it to things that as many people as possible can understand. So if we were to distill down Tim's voice, we would think of somebody like Paul Rudd, think of somebody like Tina Fey, Robert Downey Jr. I'm thinking Iron Man specifically, but obviously, he has kind of his own, like if you've watched him on that with David Letterman show, my next guest needs no introduction. He comes across like he's very cerebral, he's intellectual, but he's also kind of like laissez-faire, right? Like doesn't care. So there's a really cool mix there of depth and brevity and, not brevity, what's the word I'm thinking of? Levity. So like depth, but also like lighthearted and happy and eager to kind of dive into all the good that life has to offer. Okay. Ricky Gervais. He's the one I'm thinking of when I think of like irreverent, right? He doesn't care. Nothing's off the table for him when it comes to jokes. And so I think that that's, kind of a good reference point. So yeah, the one caveat to kind of all of the aspirational language and visionary language and this is the future and all that is that a tech brand is obviously about solving a real problem. And so the research and the development and the substance that goes into creating the products that they're putting to market is substantial. So there's a little gravitas that's required, right, to do that kind of authority positioning, and to pull it off well without coming across just like arrogant know-it-all is really a balancing act, because there's an assumption that you're probably solving a problem people didn't know existed maybe, or you're solving something in a totally new way. So whenever you have a brand that's trying to educate the market, you have to be really careful how you spin that and what that positioning looks like. So a writer comes in really handy because you're the kind of person then who can take and translate all of those like big game-changing ideas into something realistic, into something that makes sense and that resonates with people. Feels like. So when Tim talks, it feels like a game night with neighbors. So I'm thinking a bunch of young people in LA and they're in their loft and they're having a game night, right? What does that feel like? That feels like Tim. You want people to feel that way when they read this kind of content. And again, just more kind of ideas, visualizations, thinking through what Tim wants to come across like, the demographic he mostly appeals to. Obviously, we're not always going to be in this demographic, but there definitely is going to be a cohort of this demographic that's probably prevalent. And then we went in and we looked at some of the taglines, and I thought this would just be a good kind of exercise. I love reading the taglines, because this tells you, these took hours, if not weeks, if not months, if not years, right, to create. And so a lot of work has gone into this, meaning a lot of people at an organization have decided this is important enough for us all to say. This is important to agree on. Netflix, we want to entertain the world. So, big vision, the world. PayPal, the safer, easier way to pay and get paid online. So it's very value driven. Google, our company mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So they use two sweeping statements, the world and universal, right? The world and the universe. Cisco, networking, security, and collaboration products. Okay. Apple, we believe. If you've ever had a team of artists, this is a really important statement. We believe that we are on the face of the earth to make great products, and that's not changing. So the earth. So what are we seeing in common? The world, universe, earth, right? The impact of a tech brand that speaks in the voice of Tim is not local. It's not small. It's huge. Facebook, bring the world closer together, right? Everyone in the whole world. And that's where you have to be a little bit careful, obviously, like I mentioned, with kind of that arrogance angle when you're talking like Tim, right? To think of what is the balance between we're mission driven, and this is good that we're doing this, and our vision is the whole world. As Simon Sinek would probably agree with this, right? It's an infinite game, right? You can't win. It's just kind of an endless run of successive wins. Okay, so writing like Tim, I would suggest you practice. I would suggest you do some due diligence, look through that list of companies that I had at the beginning, and go Google their websites. Go read the About page is where you're going to find out, right? You want to find out from their About page, or if you have any hiring, like a lot of companies will have a subdomain where they do kind of hiring and company stuff. Find it. Read it. Think about how they're positioning, what the phrasing is like, because the more you can kind of absorb that and create a lexicon of reference points for it and kind of index those in your own brain, the more they'll come out in your writing practice in a good way. And the more you'll kind of arm yourself to be able to walk into kind of these ideation sessions with a brand like this as the writer and have lots of ideas, right? Lots of ideas of kind of phrasing you can use. And you'll also know what they kind of want to sound like. So getting this voice as part of your repertoire can be a really meaningful way to enhance your value and your hireability as a tech copywriter. Subscribe to my channel. I'm here to help you become a better writer. I want you to succeed. I want this to be part of the craft that you spend your career honing. And if you want to be a tech writer, I absolutely think you can do so successfully. So head to the blog. I've got a blog version of this that probably dives a little deeper. And then if you wanted the brand voice quiz, I'll make sure I list the URL of that in the caption, and I wish you all the best.